Hello, and welcome to our virtual event chat as part of the STEM Careers All Year series that we've done at First Book in partnership with General Motors. My name is Jenna, and I am with First Book, an education equity nonprofit. And we're so happy to come into your classroom and share a little bit more about STEM with you all. That's science, technology, engineering, and math. And I introduce you to a couple of people at our wonderful partners at General Motors or GM who know a thing or two about STEM and how it is incorporated into building vehicles. So again, want to say thank you to General Motors for being our partner and sponsor of STEM Careers All Year. If this is your first time joining us, we hope that you enjoy this short virtual chat and Q&A. We also have one more for this school year in May that will be an opportunity to hear from an author and a GM staff member. But want to turn it over in just a second to someone I love working with. Her name is Sammy Sugiyama, Manager of Corporate Grant Making at GM, who will introduce you to her colleague, Patrick Doyle, an environmental engineer, and what he does for GM. He'll share a little bit about his story, his role at GM, how he got there, and how it all connects to something that we're kind of celebrating this week, which is Earth Day. And yes, it says Earth Day, but really we want to celebrate every day and definitely this week. After Patrick shares about his journey in STEM, Sammy will join him again on the screen and share questions that you have. So whether you're joining us on YouTube or Facebook or whatever platform, please send in your questions so we can ask Sammy and Patrick a little bit more about what you're interested in knowing. So Sammy and Patrick will invite you to send in your questions in just a little bit. So now let me turn it over to Sammy Sugiyama from GM.
Thanks, Jenna. Like Jenna said, my name is Samantha Sugiyama. I'm super excited to be chatting with Patrick today and coming into all of your classrooms. And it is so critical in not just what we do here at GM making cars, but really everything in the world is really central and focused on STEM. So that's why we partner with First Book every month to put on these live virtual events where students have the opportunity to hear from real STEM professionals about their journeys and their STEM careers. And hopefully it sparks that joy and that interest and curiosity in STEM so that students can explore their STEM identities and the different fields and subjects that STEM can unlock. So with that, I'm super excited for our special guest today. Patrick Doyle is an environmental engineer, and he'll be sharing a little bit more about what that means and how he got to General Motors. And remember to put your questions in the chat. I'll be asking Patrick after he has a chance to introduce himself, and we're super excited to have him.
Thank you, Sammy. Hi, everyone. Great to see you. Thanks for having me today. And welcome to all the participants. So my name is Patrick Doyle. I'm an environmental engineer for GM at the Lansing Delta Township Assembly Plant. We make the Chevy Traverse, the Buick Enclave, and now the GMC. Two daughters, ages 3, Louisa and Celia. So I grew up in the city, Detroit. I had a very unique upbringing of having 38 family members on the same city square block, which was super cool, right? So every day was kind of like a potluck. If you didn't like what was being cooked at home, you could go right next door and eat there, or vice versa. You might be grabbing a plate, sit down, and your cousin's sitting next to you, right? So it was very unique, cool upbringing in Detroit. So I went to Detroit Public Schools. I graduated high school and I went to Michigan State University, where I then graduated, and I was looking for an adventure, right? So I took a leap of faith. I left Michigan and moved down to Louisiana, where I actually worked offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. Got to travel all over the U.S. and even some international traveling, like Abu Dhabi and Angola and a couple other different places, right? So it was just a really cool experience. Some of my STEM influence, I guess. So when I was in middle school, I was exposed to a robotics club where you would program robots to complete various trials that were timed. It was a fun experience to have. I loved getting that mix of being able to be creative while working with technology. And I think that definitely carried over to my adult life, where now I still really enjoy playing around with these tech type gadgets, if you will. Particularly, they have these low cost card sized computers called Raspberry Pis, right? So they're a very cheap and awesome resource for people of all ages to do various projects. So, what is my role at GM? So, as I mentioned, I'm an environmental engineer. So, my job is to make sure we're being environmentally compliant with operations and assembling a vehicle, right? So, this is the community we live in. This is where I'm raising my family and where I'm invested in making sure that we're protecting it, right? So, from a regulatory standpoint, I handle the air permitting, chemical management, and some other environmental reports like greenhouse gases, ISO 14001, and then our SARA Tier 2 reports. So when painting a car, right, there's the air in the booth. It's all controlled and sent to something called an RTO. So that pretty much gets that air super, super hot. And what it does is it breaks it down into harmless byproducts like carbon and carbon dioxide and water vapor, right? So pretty much our goal is to not pollute the air, and I oversee our air permit that does just that. Vehicles need gasoline, windshield wiper fluid, brake fluid, transmission fluid, paint, all those things, right? So I also manage a group that would ensure that the facility acquires these necessary materials to complete building a car, right? So it's important to me that we're handling these in a safe manner for, at work, for the people that work here at the plant, and then making sure that we're protecting the environment. So a fun thing I get to do here is I'm fortunate enough to get to oversee an amazing resource that we have here at LDT, and that's a 75-acre wildlife habitat or conservation, right? So it's certified with the Wildlife Habitat Council. I get to take part in the management of that habitat, where I get to promote biodiversity by I built a bug hotel, bat and bird boxes. We have honeybees. We make sure that we have native wildflowers, and we're managing invasive species, right? So that we have milkweed to promote and help monarch butterflies. I even get to apply some of those techie things that I mentioned earlier to improve some monitoring of the habitat as well. I get to engage with the community. I even bring my daughters out there to do different STEM related activities in nature conservation, right? So this is some pretty cool things I get to do. I get to do water quality testing with the community in different places along the Grand River. So, just lots of cool stuff here. But anyway, so, that's me. I'd love to hear from you all and take any questions that you may have.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I really appreciate you talking about your family and the experience that you had growing up, and then how you got interested in STEM. And before I start taking questions from the Q&A, I was just curious, you talked about how you got interested in STEM kind of in general, but more specifically, I guess, environmentalism and nature and the climate. What really inspired you to take a career in that lane or in that avenue?
Well, when I came back to Lansing, I did take a role as managing a waste management team. So just like being directly involved with recycling and different things like that, I guess it got excited. I got excited about it all. So it's like, wow, if I implement this thing, then we can increase our cardboard recycling X amount. So I'm deterring things from landfill that are now going to be recycled, right? So I guess the fact that I was just able to keep a pulse on that and be able to directly influence those changes and implement a plastics recycling program here at the site and cardboard recycling, just to do it all is just kind of drove a lot of excitement to get me doing things like that. And then once I was able to get more involved with the habitat and be the overseer of that, I was just blown away. Like, this is such an amazing resource. I have daughters that I can take out there and expose them to those things and learn as I go. So I guess, I wasn't really exposed to a lot of it, I guess, from a nature conservation standpoint in Detroit. So being able to take my daughters out there and do it and learn myself, and it's just exciting, and I have a lot of fun doing it. So
that's awesome. I love that you had the opportunity to see like the tangible impact that your work has. Of if you were able to implement something or do something, you saw that very real impact of how much it's deferring from landfills and how much you're able to save. I think that that's really exciting. So the first question that we have from the Q&A is, what advice do you have for students that might struggle with STEM subjects?
So I guess my advice for students that might struggle with STEM, so STEM subjects in general, I guess, can be a bit intimidating at first glance, right? Because they may seem complicated. I guess my advice would be, don't let that discourage you. All complicated things can be broken down into simple, digestible concepts, right? So like all things worth doing, it's going to take time, practice, repetition to build that familiarity and confidence, right? So don't be afraid to make mistakes. We live in a world where there's just so much help and free resources available to you. You can Google things. I've used sites like Khan Academy and Coursera, YouTube, you name it, right? There's just so much information at your fingertips that can be utilized, right? You can connect with different experts in your community, right? So there's certain things out in the habitat that I just wasn't an expert on and didn't know, right? So I was having conversations with MSU Extension, with DNR, and all these different people to bring them and lean on their expertise, and I was able to learn from that, right? So I guess my main thing is just don't get intimidated. Take a deep breath, break it down into simple steps, and use great resources and work your way through it. And you got this.
That's awesome. I think it's clear that you are a professional in this field and you still have questions. You still don't know everything there is to know about STEM and about the environment. And you know that there are resources and there are people that you can look to and go to ask for help. Because whether you're a student studying, algebra or division, you may need help, and if you're a professional years into your career, you still need help. It's about not being afraid to ask for help and knowing where you can go to find it. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, and asking is only going to make you better, make you stronger, and know more about the subject. So, yes,
definitely. So you shared some of the vehicles that are made in Lansing. I was just curious, what is your favorite vehicle that GM makes?
So I guess that I've directly made here. So we make the Traverse Enclave and the Acadia. So I will have to say the Traverse is my favorite, right? So I did end up purchasing one of these for my family. I got some more pride because it's the facility that, where we make them. Plus, I have two kids. So getting a nice, safe, all-wheel drive, three-row vehicle that wasn't a minivan was important to me. So, and then plus the new Traverse has that Z71 off-road package with like the truck stance that I think is pretty cool, right? Um, but I would say a vehicle that's really piqued my interest lately has been the new EV SS Chevy Blazer. Um, I'm interested. It has this performance mode or feature called WOW, which stands for Wide Open Watts, and it claims to be able to go 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds. Right, so that's pretty cool. Um, and then it also has the Super Cruise driver feature, like many of the new fleet vehicles are having. So I guess I'm really interested to maybe take that Blazer out for a drive.
Me too. If you ever get the chance, let me know. I want to see if I can find a way and get one too. We had another question come in about are there any resources or books that you would recommend for someone who's interested in STEM or in the environment? Are there any, resources that you yourself use or anything that you share with your daughters if they are curious about things like this?
So, yes, like I mentioned, I use Khan Academy to learn things, different sites, different, I'll Google things myself to learn. I'll ask community people, what I can, learn from them as well. With my daughters, I actually purposely buy kids' books that tailor to like I have one called Amara and the Bats, and another one that's the Leaf Thief, right? So these are all kind of wrapped around that realm of things to kind of get them interested and also get them learning things. I would say books in particular. I'm not sure off the top of my head what to recommend, but yeah, I feel like there's just so many resources out there that you can utilize to figure out just about anything. So.
Okay, speaking of bats, you had mentioned something that bug hotels. What's a bug hotel?
So a bug hotel is quite literally a hotel for bugs and insects to take shelter in, right? So these bugs so in this case, we placed a bug hotel, and we called the bug hotel Every Bug In, which is kind of a play off of Everybody In with GM. And it's got little cubbies that cater to different species of bugs and insects and things like that, right? So, yeah, it's out in the habitat, and by doing so, you're increasing your biodiversity. Birds feed on those things. All these, it just welcomes biodiversity to the habitat. So yes, we did in fact build a bug hotel.
And you got to do that for your job. As part of your job, you got to build a bug hotel. That is so crazy and so cool, and I didn't even know it exists, let alone you could do it as part of your job.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
So the Wildlife Habitat Council had a competition, and building a bug hotel was part of that competition. So we partook in it, and yes, I had a lot of fun with it, and I did get some very funny looks when I was like, "Oh, we're going to build this." But I did get the plant involved to collect materials, so it was like at a plant type event. But the look on other people's faces when people would say, "Hey, we're going out to build this bug hotel," like, what? But we had a lot of fun.
That's so funny. That's so fun. We had another question come in through the Q&A. Is there anything that we can do in our personal lives to help create sustainable practices at home? Is there anything that you do, at home or with your daughters just to be more environmentally friendly?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of things like using reusable water bottles instead of waste and things like that. Those are kind of the recycling, right? So at home we keep like a separate recycling bin for plastics and then one for cardboard, right? So um, we get cardboard boxes, we break them down, and we kind of will stack them in there and then make sure we're recycling those. Plastics as well. Another thing I noticed, like a lot of people tend to leave like labels and things like that on their plastic containers. So one thing you can do is actually removing those paper labels from those containers. So it's a more recyclable. I don't want anybody thinking you're recycling something that ultimately doesn't get recycled, right? So things like that help. Pulling labels off of glass jars and maybe rinsing out that milk jug. Things like that are things you can do. Yeah, I guess, and just taking part in other. I know there are some like community type events as well that you can kind of get plugged into with different recycling avenues that you may have in your community, right? So instead of throwing something away, maybe there's an avenue for it to be recycled in your area or a nearby area. So just educating yourself on what those resources are.
Definitely. That's such a good reminder that you can't just throw anything in recycled. Sometimes there are a couple extra steps that you got to take, but they're definitely worth taking to keep some extra stuff out of the landfills. I think we have time for one more question. So I would love to end with what is your favorite book?
Oh, what is my favorite book? That's tough. So
it could be something you've read recently. It could be something from your childhood, any book.
Yeah, so I will say I read comic books, and I generally like books in like the fantasy genre, and I also like self-improvement type books, right? So Spider-Man, Game of Thrones, books on mindset and finances, right? I like all this stuff. But to give like a specific book, I kind of briefly mentioned it earlier, is I read to my daughters, and my current favorite is The Leaf Thief. It's about a squirrel searching for someone that's stealing his leaves, but it's really just the fall time of year, and it's a funny animated book. It teaches them about autumn, seasons, adapting to change, right? And most importantly, it makes my 3-year-old crack up. So when I read it, so I'll go with that being my favorite right now.
I'm gonna have to go look it up. It sounds adorable. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing and giving us a little bit of more insight into what you do and how we can be more sustainable. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
Patrick, thank you so much for joining us, and Sammy, of course, for all the work you do. We really appreciate you sharing about yourself, about your STEM background, your interests, and what you do at GM, and giving us an idea of what book we should go out and read in the library or buy from the First Book Marketplace educators. So, Patrick, thanks again. Really appreciate your time. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me.
Sure. And then for everyone else, we hope you can join us on May 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern for our final STEM Careers All Year virtual event with General Motors. We're having a First Book fan favorite author. Her name is Dr. Thean Griffith. She joined us in 2022, actually, for STEM Careers All Year, and will be joining us on May 15th for our final STEM Careers All Year. So registration will be sent out in a week or two, so take a look for that, educators, and we hope you can join us in May. Thank you again for tuning in, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.